Okay, so before I get this started, or rather before I get this all edited, because I've already done the recording for everything, this is basically me talking about how I didn't do the presentation as well as I had wanted to, and that's mostly because I had accidentally saved another file over the initial projects that I was doing without realizing it. I must have accidentally touched save when I was doing it instead of save as, so that I would have a separate file saved rather than just, that file saved over. So yeah, that's kind of why, if it sounds like I'm a little all over the place, I had everything prepared, and then last minute I had to scramble because I was like, oh no, oh no, oh no, everything's gone. But yeah, basically, if you like what you heard or if you like what you see, just leave it in the comments below. Leave a like on the video or whatever. Um, I am trying to get a little better at this, so any kind of feedback would be fine. It doesn't matter. And basically, I feel really good about this. I like what I did, and there will definitely be more videos using this presentation platform, because it is the best way for me to show off the cards since I can't physically show them off because, well, they're not made yet. So yeah, just if you want, tell me what you like. If you have any critiques, tell me that too. And yeah, I'll see you in the next one. All right, viewers, happy Friday, and welcome to the Tamen TCG Basics tutorial video. What I'm going to be showing you today is a general gist of how the game Tamen TCG is meant to be played. There won't be any in-depth detail based on the creatures themselves. That's going to be separate videos for other videos, but right now I'm just going to show you how the game works as a whole, and hopefully I do a good job in doing so. So let's get into it. So in order to start things off, we're going to answer the question, what is Tamen? While I cannot answer it from the lore side of things because it is not complete and I did not have the ability to put it into the presentation because of that, I can answer what it is for the game itself. Players use an assortment of creatures with abilities that aid in battle by supporting each other while disrupting your opponent. So basically, your creatures will support themselves or each other. They will build each other up in order to break down your opponent's creatures. And by doing so, it will allow you to reach the objective. And the objective is to defeat your opponent by attacking them directly with any creature you have available. So once you defeat all the creatures on your opponent's boards and you still have at least one creature left on the board, and you attack your opponent directly, that is the game. Alright, so now we're going to talk about how to set up the game before actually starting the game itself. In order to do that, players separate their 3 card types into their respective zones on the board. So each deck comes with creature, gear, and event cards, and these cards will be separated into the different sections on the board. After you have done that, you will select creatures equal to the size count of 5 to place on the field face down. Each creature in the top right corner of their card has a number that will tell you how many spaces they take up on the field. You can pick any number of creatures as long as it equals up to the count of 5 or takes up 5 spaces on the board, and you will place them face down on the field. After you do that, you will shuffle your creature deck and then draw your remaining hand, and then you will place that hand into the roster. After determining which player goes first, players will reveal the Tamen on the board, then the first player will initiate the draw phase. So here you have a visual representation of what the board should look like. You have your creature, your gear, and your event deck spaces, as well as your discard and your roster. The alpha, beta, and gamma spaces on the board will determine what abilities your creatures can use, and so far that is all it really does. There may be something more that they do, but that will be explained in a later video if I can figure out what that is. And now here we have the 2 creatures that I would choose to set on the board before the game starts, Sheertan and Volcanon Golem. One is size 2, one is size 3, so that is a total of 5. I will take these creatures and put them onto the board face down. and then I will draw the remaining creatures from the deck to my hand and place them immediately into the roster. After that, I will reveal the creatures and draw phase. I don't know why I was struggling with that. And that will be my turn. Or that will be my phase. Next up is the set phase and how to set cards during the gameplay. Tamen must be set in the roster face down before being summoned and must remain set until the next set phase, where the player can choose to reveal those cards. Not counting the Tamen on the board, you can set up to 5 Tamen at one time. So basically, if you have like 2 Tamen, 2 creatures on the board, you can still set 5 creatures in the roster. The roster doesn't care how big or how small your creatures are, they're just cards at that point. And here we will have a visual representation of how that works. So I have the 2 creatures that I summoned from beforehand, and then there's the 3 cards in the roster. What I will do is I will draw a card and immediately put it into the roster. Next up is an example of putting all the cards in the roster at one time. So if I were to have multiple cards in my hand, I could put multiple cards in the roster at one time. Alright, now we're going to move on to the summoning portion of the game. After revealing a set Tamen in the roster, it is capable of being summoned. To be summoned on the field, the Tamen size count must be equal to or less than the current available space on the field. So once again, talking about the size count of a card, this is arguably the single most important part of the game. This is basically your mana point system, your cost system, whatever you want to call it. That's how it works in this game. So here we're going to have a visual representation of how the summoning works. I have a card in my hand, that's the little square at the bottom here. I'm going to take that card and I'm going to put it into the roster. And since I just put it in there, I cannot summon it until the next set phase. So now let's just say that this is the next set phase. The creature is revealed. It is Infernus Wyvern. I summon it to the field. And because I had available space, because it is only a size 2, I can now summon that creature as well. Ooh, I don't know what happened to my voice there. Following the summoning mechanic, now we are on to how to withdraw a creature. A Tamen can only be withdrawn when there is an available slot in the roster. Tamen cannot be withdrawn the same turn they were summoned. If a Tamen is forced to the roster by an ability while the roster is full, it will either be discarded or tapped, depending on what the ability specifies. So here we are going to have a visual representation on how to withdraw. We are just going to take Sheer Tan and put it into the roster. Pretty simple. Now we move on to discarding, and this will put a bit of an extension on the withdraw thing, talking about what happens if there are too many things within the roster. All cards in the game are discarded into the discard pile. So every card has their own place where they go onto the board during gameplay, but when they are discarded and no longer in use, they all go into the singular discard pile. Discarded cards can only be used by the ability of another card or by the ability of the card itself. So basically, you can't just draw the card out of the discard pile, which, that's a given for anyone who's played a card game, but, it's still good to specify that stuff. Cards retrieved from the discard pile can be used the turn they are drawn. So if you manage to get a card out of the discard pile, you can still use it that same turn. Tamen revived by an ability must follow the size count rule for summoning. A revived Tamen is summoned to the field before being withdrawn to the roster. So yeah, if you have an ability to revive a Tamen, the Tamen is revived to the field before you can put it back into the roster. So you have to make sure that you have space in order to revive said Tamen. And that's pretty much it. I don't know what I was trying to extend on that. And now we are going to have a visual representation of discarding. So right here you can see that this darkened card indicates that there are 5 cards in the roster, meaning that none of my cards have anywhere to go. And let's say you have an opponent who gives you the ability to, who has the ability to push a creature into the roster. It will either tap or it will go into the discard pile, which there are creatures that will do that. That will mostly be for the Ventus archetype, not archetype, the Ventus attribute. A lot of them have to deal with, pushing creatures back or switching them around or just controlling the movement of other creatures. But I'm not going to get into that. That's something for way later. Now we are into shifting, and actually that's a good segue. The shifting is basically when, oh well, it's going to be on here, but it's basically when you can move your creatures around on the board without having to put them into the roster. So, as I just said, shifting allows Tamen to move around on the board without having to return them into the roster. And the purpose of this is because when a Tamen is placed in the roster, all stats are reset to its original stats. So if a Tamen is like, if you have one of your creatures super weak and you want to get it back into the roster to heal up to use it for another play, you can do that. It'll regenerate all its health back, all its health, all its stats, all everything. But also, if you have an opponent that has a creature that is like super above average to most any creature you may currently have on the board, if you're able to push it back, you push it back and you reset all its stats back down to its regular stats. So there is a plus and a minus to it. Yes, it also allows Tamen to retain their gear in battle. Tamen cannot be withdrawn while they have gear. If you do withdraw a Tamen, the gear must be discarded beforehand. Tamen can shift around the board equal to their range, so Tamen will have. So in the stats area of the card, there is strike, guard, and range. Range will have a number between 1 and 5 that is equal to the spaces on the board. Range will tell you how many creatures. It will tell you how many creatures you can hit. It'll give you how many spaces you're able to target, and it also tells you how many times you can move on the board. If two Tamen switch stances tripping. If two Tamen switch stances during shift, so if they switch spaces on the board, both Tamen have used one shift. Shifting does not reduce the range of the Tamen, however, so it doesn't affect how many creatures it can hit at one time or how many targets it can target. It's just, it can't move any more than it could beforehand. When a Tamen shifts, it can avoid the range of a rival, so it can avoid being hit by one of your opponent's monsters, or it can get in range to hit one of your opponent monsters if it's trying to get out of range. Some Tamen are capable of using multiple abilities if it can shift after using a previous ability that same phase or turn. So for most abilities, you will have to tap your Tamen in order to use that ability, but some Tamen have innate abilities where once you summon them, something happens, or once you put them on to a certain space, it will just go ahead and do whatever it's doing. And then by doing that, you may also be able to shift it in order to do another thing, basically, stacking that ability if it does that. That's still in the works because it's a bit more complicated, but I do have a few ideas of how I can make that work. And here we will have a visual representation. So here we have Shirtan, and we want to move Shirtan up into the alpha space. Shirtan only has a range of 1, so it can only move 1 space, and it is going to exchange space with Volcanic Golem, who has a range of 2. So here's how we do it. We pick up the cards, they switch places, they both have used 1 shift, but because Volcanic Golem has 2, my voice is just cracking. Because Volcanic Golem has 2 range, it can now move 1 more space, so we're going to do that. And now Volcanic Golem can no longer move anymore because it used all its spaces, and if it has an ability that can be activated, well, they can activate that ability. Alright, now on to striking. Striking is the act of using the strike points of a Tamen to deal damage to a target. Strike points usually do more damage but have no secondary effect. So basically, striking is just the act of using the raw power of the Tamen without using any of the abilities that it has. Strike points and the strike points of an ability are two separate things. When you strike with a Tamen, you're pretty much just using the strike points, and then you're going to tap it to show that you're no longer having it in use. Or you can tap the Tamen before striking and use the ability that it has, and that will be the damage instead of just, the regular strike points. So, abilities have secondary effects but may have weaker strike damage, while sprinklers just went off, while strike points have, well, higher hit points but no secondary effect. Yes, and again, place it in tap position after striking, and Tamen with lower strike points can attack Tamen with higher guard points. So we do incremental damage in this game, meaning that a weak creature can attack a strong defense creature and just take down its defense one by one. Or you could have multiple creatures attack one creature in order to take it down a lot faster. So here we have a visual representation of how all this works. Shirtan is a very relatively weak creature with only 15 strike points, while Volcanic Golem's defense points are a lot higher, but still he can go in for the 15 damage. And here is a close-up representation of how this all works. So as you can see, Shirtan has a strike of, or Volcanic Golem has a guard of 60, Shirtan has a strike of 15. Shirtan can still attack Volcanic Golem, and in doing so, you will take the guard and reduce it by the strike damage of Shirtan, giving you, if I've done my math correctly, because I'm not the best at math, giving you a remainder of 45 guard. And then, you can do this again with other creatures on the board if you have them, and then reduce it even more, but, that's basically how this works. And then after you use Shirtan to strike, then you will put it into the tap position, and it can no longer do anything until you can untap it during the beginning of the draw phase. All right, and last but not least, we have equipping gear. Equipping and using gear. Gear can be singe use or equips. That should be single. I guess there was a typo that happened when I was editing this. Gear can be single use or equipped. Single use are used immediately, then discarded, which is an obviously given. Equips are attached to a Tamen and can be used however many times the equip allows. Tamen cannot be withdrawn while equipped with gear. I've explained that earlier. And if a Tamen is forced into the roster, the equipped gear is discarded before being sent to the roster. So that is also an advantage and disadvantage you may have if your opponent gives your Tamen a gear that just makes it a little bit more difficult for you to do anything. If you have a way to put that Tamen back into the roster, the gear will be destroyed. Or if you just have a way to destroy the gear from that Tamen, that will work as well. So here we are going to have a visual representation of how equipping gear works. We will draw one card from the gear pile, place it in our hand, and then we will place it onto a creature, a Tamen. And that's basically it. That's it. Now, double gear draw. So this is something I added in. This is something I've been thinking about for a while, but I just added it in last minute because I wanted to show how it works, just in case it might be a little confusing. But basically, what you're going to do is you are going to, during the draw phase, skip drawing a creature from the creature card deck, and draw 2 gear from the gear pile and place them into your hand. Now, in order to do that, you must have at least 1 creature card in your creature pile. You cannot do that if there are no creatures to draw. So basically, make sure that there's always at least 1 creature in the creature pile in order to do a double gear draw, and you can do this as many times as you want to. So, yeah. And then we are going to take these 2 cards and we are going to equip them to our creatures on the field. You can equip cards as many times as you want to 1 creature on the field. So basically what I'm trying to say is each creature can have 1 gear and you can equip them as many times as you want to, as long as it's just that 1 gear. So I think that is pretty much it for this one. Let me see. Yeah, that's pretty much it for this one. There is one thing I did not explain, and that is the event cards, and that is because that is still something that is very much in development. I can't even give you an example of what I would do for that because I got to work on those better. But once I put those in, that's really going to be like the advanced combo maker, because regardless of what creatures you have, that's what's really going to power up the deck. So I got to get on those. I got to get to explaining how the creatures work together. So either starting, God, do I want to say today? Sure. Maybe today I'll have a video of a single creature that I will show on how it works, and then next week I will do 1 video a day of how the other creatures work for that 1 attribute, and then I'll be doing updates on showing what happens with the other attribute creatures. So yeah, basically I'm going to be continuing doing showcases this way. It's the best way for me to do it since I can't really show you how they work physically. And yeah, that's basically it. So this wasn't as controlled as I thought it would be. I thought I would have a better hold on it, but well, one, I do have a bit of a scar in my mouth, so I was trying my best not to hit it. I bit like a dent in my cheek or something. And also, I'm not used to talking this long, so yeah, there's also that. But if you have any questions, leave them in the comments. If you have any critiques, leave them in the comments. If you just want to say hi, you can say that in the comments as well. And I will definitely be doing more presentations. Like I said, I will be doing one later today. It might be right after this video, or it might be some time after this video. But yeah, I'm really moving along with this project, and I feel good about where it's going. So yeah, I'm gonna give my throat a rest because I can feel like my tonsil just burning and screaming. So I'm gonna end this video here, and I will see you in the next one.